Are you a beginner at the game of chess and don't know what opening to play as black? Well, fear not, because I got you covered. I'm going to teach you my favorite opening to play with the black pieces, and an opening you can use too and dominate at any level. This is the French defense. So sit back, pay attention, grab your notebook if needed, and listen as I take you on this journey of teaching you how to play the French defense. So the French defense arises from these opening moves here. And notice that this isn't the common opening move of e5 for black. And right away, you threw off white because they're expecting you to play the mainline stuff. And then if you play that, they can play whatever they want. They can play that, they can play that, they can play this, they can play the King's Gambit. They can play whatever they're prepared for because whatever white is prepared for, it's going to be against e5. I can tell you immediately, they are not prepared for e6, the French defense. So what we're going to touch on today is this, because this is what's played almost all the time, the move d4, because it controls the center, and we did nothing to stop them taking the square. So by golly, they're going to do it. And then we're going to play d5. And this is the French defense right here. This is it. And from here, there are a couple continuations white can do. They can play the advance, which we're going to look at first. They can play the classical, which we'll look at second. And finally, they can play the exchange, which we'll look at third. So starting with the advance. And what this does for white is it creates a nice little pawn chain here of two pawns and also gives us a lack of space. So now we can't move our knight to f6 because it'll get taken. And we can't really move our bishop here either. So yeah, we're playing with the lack of space. So what we're going to do here is we're going to attack the d4 pawn with this move. And we hope they take it, because if they do, then we can play bishop to c5. Life is good, we got a bishop developed, we can develop our knight. Yeah, it's as easy as that. But I guarantee you they won't do that because they're not stupid. They will instead play one of two things. They will play either this, or they will play either this. Well, those are the two things they could play. So, the first move, this. And they're foregoing the chance to make a nice pawn chain of 4 pawns here. You thought 2 pawns was good enough? Well, 4 would be even better. And we're going to punish them for that. We're going to go ahead and take. And then they'll take back with either the queen or the knight. If they take back with the queen, or even the knight for that matter, it's going to be knight to c6. And I think what they'll do, what I've seen most of the time, is they'll play bishop to b5, pinning this knight. What we're going to do is we're just going to undo the pin. And now they have to move their queen. And if they do, congratulations, you've won a pawn. Because if they take, you take the bishop. And if they take the bishop, then you take the knight. Or you take with the knight, sorry. So you're up a pawn, and the engine gives you a 1.7 advantage. But let's say they take back with the knight. Like I said, it's going to be the same thing. Knight to c6. And if they take, you take. And now you got a nice little pawn structure here. You can get your bishop out. You can move knight to e7, then to g6, attacking this pawn. You can move queen to c7. Any of them work. But let's say they do this pin again. Well, same thing. You undo the pin. Remember this move. It's key. And if they take, you can just take. They take. Then we're back to the same thing. But if they forego the chance to take, we're going to, like, let's say they played this. We're just going to take the pawn. And if they take our bishop, we'll take with our knight. And just like that, we got a nice little advantage there. So that is the advanced variation. Let's see what they call it. It is called the Nimzowitsch system, which I didn't even know that. But that is the Nimzowitsch system. But let's go ahead and take a look at the most common move from this position for white. Well, actually, we gotta make this move first. That's the move c3. Building a nice pawn chain and protecting this pawn in the center. If we immediately take, it's not like the worst thing in the world, but if they take back, Then they got these 2 pawns here. We're basically where we started. Lack of space and whatever. So we'll go ahead and add pressure to the center, the d4 pawn, by playing knight to c6. And then what they'll do is they'll play knight to f3, defending this, and we'll play queen to b6. And what you notice is it's a multi-purpose move, because not only is it putting more pressure to the d4 pawn, but it's also getting this b2 pawn here, or targeting it. So if they play bishop to f4, developing a bishop and defending this pawn, it's actually bad because you can just take on b2. And now they're in trouble because they're going to lose the rook, or they're going to lose the pawn on c3. But the 2 most common moves they'll play here are with their light squared bishop, preparing for their king to castle, either here or here. Let's look at this one first, the Milner-Berry Gambit. And it's actually dangerous because there's a trap they can run on you, but if you watch this video, you will not fall for that trap. If you take, which is actually the right thing to do, you should take in this position, and even if they move bishop to e2, you will still take. And then they take back. If you take, and they take, and you take, you might think you're up a pawn, and you're attacking the e5 pawn. Well, it's actually really bad for you, because they could play bishop to b5, and now your queen is lost, because you block, and they move their queen here, and now you're done. You're not winning this. So do not fall for that trap. Instead, when they take, you play bishop to d7, which prevents the bishop from getting to b5 and playing a check. So now they have to do something about that pawn, and they will most likely play bishop to e2. And now we play knight to e7. And they castle. Well, that's actually bad because you play knight to f5. And now this pawn here is going to be taken. They could try to defend it, but I think they forgot that you can just take on b2. So let's say they play knight here. You could take, and if they threaten your queen, you take with check. They take back, and then you play queen to the center. You can also play queen to c7, attacking this pawn, or queen back to d8, but I think this is what the engine likes most. Although there's nothing wrong with any of the moves I showed there. And then they can trade queens. You also have the knight attacked. There's a lot of stuff you can do. But regardless, you're up a pawn and you're in a winning position. Now let's say they play bishop to e2 immediately. Well, it's the same thing. You play knight to e7. Well, it's the same thing, you just don't play bishop to d7 ever because that's not a threat. And then they castle, and now you play knight to f5. And notice how castling looks like a... Oh, I missed a move here. When they played bishop to e2, you gotta take first. And when you take first, then they will... Then you can play knight to e7. And then they'll castle. I just got backwards on that. Because castling looks like such a normal move. But you can play knight to d4. Or knight to f5 looking for the pawn on d4. And now they're also kind of done. Because remember, they play bishop to e3. You take the pawn, and you're going to be in a winning position. So that covers the c3 push. What about knight to c3 instead of the advanced variation? This is what is known as the classical variation. Or normal, I guess. I think it's the same thing. You're going to keep it simple. Instead of playing the winnower variation or whatever this is, and then they push, and now you're into a lot of theory, I would just go ahead and take on e4. And they'll take back, and now you're going to play something called the Fort Knox. Which what it does is it gets your bishop out and on this strong diagonal. And notice how it's not a bad bishop, because it was originally blocked by this e6 pawn. And in most lines, that's the case. But in this line, it's not. We put it on a good diagonal. They'll protect their knight. And instead of playing knight here, because look what happens. They take, you take, and they play bishop here. And now your queen is going to be trapped. You can find the tricky move this, but then they just play queen here, defending the bishop, and your queen is trapped. There's nothing you can do. And if you take this pawn, it's like earlier. we'll just do that. And check your king and win your queen. So what you need to do first is you need to play knight to d7. And then they'll castle, and then you play knight to f6. And now, if they take, you can take with the queen. Because this move doesn't work. Because now you can do this. And if they take, you take the bishop. But if they go here, you just take this free pawn. And notice how you have knight d7 blocking the check from the bishop. And in turn, if they play that, you win their queen. Well, actually, you don't. But they take, and you're just in a favorable position. The engine really likes this. So that's the Fort Knox. It's as simple as that. And it can even be played against the two knights, which would go from something like this. You don't see it very often, but it does exist. So I would be ready for that. But that's not what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about the most commonly played things from the French, which is this center control here. And then they just play the exchange, which, me personally, it is my least favorite line to play as a French player because it's simple. But I don't think it's all that bad, simply because you're not losing. You're not significantly winning. You're not even slightly winning, but you're not losing. And I think you are completely fine with not losing. So what do you do in the exchange? Well, I will tell you, there is a line where you can play queen to d5, but you're really hoping they don't notice this. Because if they do that, you can't take because they can just take with the bishop. You kind of have to move your queen back, and they got these nice pawns here. They got a tempo. They can play anything. So instead, just don't mess around. Take back with the pawn. And what you're going to do here is you're going to do, well, when they do that, you could play bishop to d6, which puts your bishop on a nice diagonal, getting ready for a kingside attack in the future. And then, well, actually, let's say they play here. You can't play bishop to d6. Oh, no, wrong move. You can't play bishop to d6 because they'll just take the pawn. You instead need to play knight to f6 first. And then you can play bishop to d6. Or you can play that. And then you can do your bishop to d6. But going back to this here, and then playing that, and then let's just say they get their bishop out. You can also play knight to e7, because I like this move, because it blocks this queen check, and they can't do that. And then you're ready to castle, but moving your knight to f6 is not all that bad either. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I kind of prefer that a bit, because it gets your knight developed on a traditional square. And if they do happen to check you out on e2, you can just play, you can block with the bishop on e7, or you can play bishop to c6. I prefer bishop to c6. But let's say they play something different. They pin your knight. Actually, first, let's say they play this first, and you castle, and then they play this. You need to be careful, because if you just play this, they take, you take, and they win this pawn, and you don't want that. So that's when this move comes into play. And another bonus off of this move is that eventually you can get your bishop out, you can get your knight to d7, and then you can play queen to c7, and you'll get a nice battery. So if his king ever castles, you can have your bishop and your queen aiming at his h2 pawn. And you could launch a kingside attack that way. And you can bring this knight into play. You can bring your light squared bishop into play. So yeah. Now, some people will say against the exchange, going back, to get your queenside pieces out and queenside castle. And that would look something like this. Let's see here. It would look something like this. I don't suggest that because I think it's a bit too risky. They could launch an attack on your queenside king, and I feel like the most simple way, most foolproof way to do it is to play the way I taught, where you get your bishop to d6 and you kingside castle. I think that's the safest way to play the exchange variation. So that is all I want to talk about today, the main stuff. I'm just going to go over some extra sidelines just really quickly here. I will say, no matter what white plays on their second move, you're going to play pawn to d5. So let's cover some alternate moves. They could play knight to f3, then you just play here, they take, you take, and it kind of just becomes an exchange variation, which we know because I taught it to you. Or they could advance, and at this point you play pawn to c5, they'll probably play that, and now this looks familiar from what I talked about at the beginning. They could play this, you just do that. I don't know what they'd even play, like this, turn into a classical, this, take the queen, make him lose a tempo. They could play this, just do that. And I've also seen this, where again you just go here. So that is the French defense for you. I hope it works out. I would give it a try because I think it will do good things for you and help boost your chess elo. So let me know if you have any questions in the comments. Thank you for watching. ChessCrusher out.